I never liked having guests over. My apartment was small, my schedule was tight, and honestly, I just valued my space. But when my old classmate Brian called me out of the blue asking if he could crash for a night, I hesitated. We weren't close, but we'd had good times back in college. He sounded desperate, said he was in town for a work trip, and his hotel messed up his booking. I didn't want to be rude, so I reluctantly agreed. It was already past 10 when he arrived. He looked off. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes slightly bloodshot. He kept shifting on his feet as if he was nervous about something. But he was polite enough, thanked me several times, and dropped his bag near the couch. I told him I had work early in the morning, so I'd be heading to bed soon. He nodded and said he'd just crash on the couch and be gone by sunrise. Something about the way he sat on the couch unsettled me. He didn't lounge back or look at his phone. He just sat there, hands on his knees, staring at the blank TV screen. I shook it off and went to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. Not out of fear, just habit. At least, that's what I told myself. Around 2:30 a.m., I suddenly woke up to a faint creaking sound, like someone was walking on the wooden floor. My apartment was small, just a living room, a tiny kitchen, and my bedroom, so every noise was amplified in the silence. I lay still, listening, my breath shallow. The air felt heavier, like something was off. Then I heard something worse, the distinct click of my bedroom door handle turning. I bolted upright. The door was locked, but someone was trying to open it. I stayed silent, hoping he'd realize his mistake and go back to the couch, but the handle kept rattling. A soft, slow, persistent sound. "Brian?" I called out. The rattling stopped immediately. Silence stretched on for too long. Then finally he spoke. "Oh, sorry man, I got confused. Thought this was the bathroom." His voice was too calm, too casual. The bathroom was on the other side of the apartment. There was no way he'd make that mistake. My stomach tightened. "It's on the left," I said firmly. A pause, then the sound of slow footsteps moving away. I sat there, pulse racing, ears straining to hear more. After a minute, I forced myself to breathe. Maybe he was just drunk or groggy. Maybe I was overreacting. But I didn't go back to sleep. I sat in bed, listening. Every few minutes, I heard faint movements. Fabric rustling, soft breathing. He wasn't asleep. He was awake, moving around the living room. At 3:15 a.m., I heard something that made my blood run cold. The unmistakable sound of a knife being taken out of the kitchen drawer. A metallic scrape against wood. My mind raced. What the hell was he doing? Was he sleepwalking? I reached for my phone, heart hammering. I should call the police. But what would I even say? My guest, who I invited, is rummaging in my kitchen at 3 a.m. It wasn't illegal to use a kitchen knife. I decided to wait. I needed more proof that something was seriously wrong. For the next 10 minutes, I heard slow, deliberate movements. Him pacing near the couch, the occasional soft clink of metal. Then, silence. Too much silence. I leaned toward my door, trying to hear better, and then, a soft whisper right outside my door. "Are you awake?" I froze. My whole body went rigid. The voice was barely audible, but I knew it was Brian. He was standing right outside my door, whispering to me. I didn't answer. My fingers tightened around my phone. My mind screamed at me to do something, but I couldn't move. Then came the worst part. The whispering continued, but now it wasn't words, it was muttering. Fast, incoherent mumbling. I couldn't make out a single word. It sounded almost frantic, like he was arguing with himself under his breath. I started dialing 911, hands shaking. But before I could press call, the muttering stopped. A single, deep exhale. Then retreating footsteps, the sound of the couch creaking. He was back in the living room. I didn't sleep. I sat in bed until the sun started creeping through the curtains. At around 6 a.m., I heard movement again, the rustle of fabric, the jingle of keys, then the front door opening and quietly clicking shut. I waited 15 minutes before leaving my room. The living room looked the same as before, except for one thing. The kitchen knife was on the coffee table. Clean, but placed carefully in the center. I checked the front door, locked from the inside. Brian didn't have a spare key. I never heard from him again. His number was disconnected. When I asked some mutual friends, they said Brian had lost his job a month ago. He wasn't in town for work. He had no reason to be here. I don't know what he was planning that night, but I know one thing. I wasn't supposed to wake up. Hi friends, my channel is stuck and I need your help. Please watch my full videos, like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends to unfreeze it. Your support means everything and will help me bring you more chilling stories. I took the job because it was easy money. A week of house sitting for a wealthy couple while they vacationed in Europe. All I had to do was feed their golden retriever, water a few plants, and keep the house secure. They even had a state-of-the-art security system. Motion sensors, cameras, automatic locks. Safe, simple, and well paid. There was only one strange thing. "When we leave," Mr. Caldwell said, handing me the keys, "don't answer the door after midnight." Mrs. Caldwell forced a smile, like it was a joke. "Just a precaution, safety reasons." I laughed a little, but they didn't. They just exchanged a glance before heading out the door. I didn't think much of it. Rich people were weird about security. The first night was peaceful. I made dinner, played with the dog, and watched TV in the massive living room. At around 11:30 p.m., I double-checked the doors and windows before heading to bed. The house was so silent it made me uneasy. Then at exactly 11:45 p.m., I heard it, a knock at the front door. Not loud, not frantic, just patient. The security system was connected to my phone, so I opened the app and checked the camera feed. A man stood at the doorstep. He wore a hoodie, his face obscured by the shadows. He didn't move, didn't fidget, just stood there, waiting. I held my breath, watching. Maybe he'd go away. Minutes passed, the knocking stopped. Then slowly, he turned and walked down the driveway. I exhaled, shaking my head. Probably some lost guy or a prankster. I checked the locks again and went to bed. But an hour later, I woke up to something worse. Muddy footprints inside the house. They started at the front door and led to the staircase. My stomach twisted as I followed them, my bare feet barely making a sound against the cold tile floor. The footprints stopped right outside my bedroom door. I checked the security feed again. Every door was locked. The motion sensors hadn't been triggered. There was no way anyone had gotten in. The dog growled lowly, ears perked up, staring at something in the hallway. I didn't sleep that night. The second night, I locked everything early, turned off the lights, and kept my phone beside me. I told myself it was just paranoia. Maybe I had tracked in the mud myself. Maybe I was imagining things. At 11:45 p.m., the knocking came again. Louder this time. I checked the camera. The same man stood there. This time he moved. He pulled out a phone and dialed a number. A second later, my phone vibrated. Caller ID, home. My throat tightened. The security system should have prevented any calls from inside the house. I let it ring, staring at the screen until it stopped. Then, the house alarm blared. Alert, back door open. I grabbed the nearest knife from the kitchen and ran to the bathroom, locking myself inside. My breath came in shallow gasps as I pressed my ear against the door. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, then silence. A whisper seeped through the gap beneath the door. "I know you're in there." I barely managed to dial 911 with shaking fingers. The police arrived within minutes. They found no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no disturbed locks. The security system showed no breaches except for the back door, which was somehow wide open. But that wasn't the worst part. In the kitchen, sitting neatly on the counter, was a Polaroid photo. It was a picture of me, sleeping, A single word was scrawled at the bottom in black ink. Guest. I had lived in my new house for barely 2 months when it happened. A quiet suburban neighborhood, friendly neighbors, and a house that finally felt like my own after the messy breakup with my ex. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a peaceful place where I could focus on my work and not have to worry about anything or anyone. That night, rain drummed softly against the windows and a cold wind whispered through the trees outside. I was curled up on the couch, laptop on my lap, working on a project while a rerun of some sitcom played in the background. It was just past midnight when I heard it. A knock. Soft, deliberate, coming from the front door. I frowned, pausing my work. Who would be knocking at this hour? My neighbors were mostly elderly couples who turned in early, and I hadn't made any new friends in the area yet. Curious but cautious, I muted the TV and crept toward the peephole. No one was there. I stood still for a moment. The wind had picked up, making the branches scratch against the siding. Maybe it had been the wind? Shaking it off, I locked the door, just in case, and returned to the couch. But something about it unsettled me. A creeping sense of unease crawled up my spine. And then, 30 minutes later, I heard it again. Not a knock this time, a faint, rustling noise, like fabric brushing against a hard surface. It was coming from the hallway. A chill ran through me. My house wasn't big, just a small living room, a kitchen, my bedroom, and a spare room I barely used. But I was alone. There shouldn't be any noise in the hallway. I slowly turned my head toward the source of the sound. Nothing but darkness beyond the glow of the TV. My breath felt heavy in my chest. Then from the corner of my eye, I noticed something that made my heart stop. My front door was unlocked. I was sure, absolutely sure, I had locked it earlier. I swallowed hard, my fingers gripping the armrest. Something felt wrong. The room was too quiet, the air too still. I stood up carefully, grabbing my phone. My first instinct was to call someone, but who? The police? What would I even say? I forced myself to check the door, inching toward it on shaky legs. My hands trembled as I reached for the handle. When a low creak came from behind me, I turned so fast my vision blurred. Nothing. I was alone. But the feeling of being watched was unbearable. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a heavy metal flashlight, and moved toward the kitchen where I kept a knife block. If someone was in here, I needed to be ready. I stepped into the kitchen and flicked on the light. My stomach dropped. My purse was on the counter, unzipped. My wallet was missing. My hands went cold. Someone had been in here. Frantically, I checked the back door. Still locked. The windows, secure. Then how the hell did they get in? And then, as I turned to leave the kitchen, my flashlight beam caught something on the floor. Muddy footprints, leading from the back door to the staircase. My stomach twisted. The prints stopped at my bedroom door. I took a shaky step back, my breath uneven. My bedroom door was still open from earlier. Was someone in there right now, hiding, watching me? A soft exhale filled the silence, not mine. I felt it before I even heard it, the shift of the air, the presence behind me. I turned, heart slamming against my ribs, but there was nothing there. The kitchen was empty. The hallway was empty, and yet I still felt it. Someone was there. Someone was watching. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. My mind screamed at me to do something. Call the police, get out, move. But fear had locked me in place. And then, a sound from the living room. A soft, wet crunch, like someone taking a bite of food. Slowly, I turned my head. On the coffee table next to my laptop was a half-eaten sandwich. I hadn't made one. My stomach twisted. I backed away, my pulse hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. The operator answered. I whispered into the receiver, "Someone's in my house." The minutes stretched like hours. I kept my back to the wall, watching every shadow, every doorway. I barely breathed. By the time the police arrived, the house was empty. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing stolen, except my wallet. They checked the security footage. At 11:50 p.m., a hooded figure entered through the front door. At 11:55 p.m., the camera glitched. At midnight, the front door unlocked by itself, and at 12:30 a.m., the footage ended. Whoever had been inside, they never left on camera. I didn't stay another night. I packed a bag and left before the sun even came up. The police never found the intruder, never figured out how they got in or out. But that night, I learned something I'll never forget. When you're home alone and you think you're safe, you might not be as alone as you think.